Welcome back in, Geico OutKick Studio. Hope all of you are having a fantastic Tuesday. And I know it's a crazy year in sports and a crazy year in general. And I feel like things just sneak up on me all the time. You know, I'll be sitting around and I'll be like, I don't even know what month it is hardly. Day of the week is hard to keep tabs on. And the fact that signing day is going to be tomorrow is crazy. So a lot of you sitting around right now, you're like, what? Yeah, college football signing day. Because usually they used to have it in February, and then they added the new early signing period. But at least usually, like, you have all the conference title games played, and there's like a couple of weeks to get your breath. And instead, we got games going on Saturday. We'll figure out who's going to be in the playoff. And in the meantime, we've got a lot of high school kids come Wednesday morning that are going to be signing. And we bring in Bart and Simmons, who I feel like we bring in. This is like the fifth straight year we've done it on OutKick. I used to have him on The Zone when I did my local show in Nashville because he's an expert in the high school recruiting business and college football ranking. And Barton, does it seem just as weird to you, even as a guy who's been doing this for a while, that, hey, here we are again in this, and all of a sudden signing day is here?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you said it snuck up on you. It snuck up on me too. I mean, this is a cycle. I mean, obviously it's a bizarre year. It's been no camps or combines for the most part, no visits for these kids. The signing days, literally, like, usually you talk about sort of, we went from the February signing day to the early signing day and now to the pandemic signing day. And if you think about it, back in the February signing day, you could be a new coach hire.
Yep.
And it was almost a good thing. If you were taking over a new program, you had like a month and a half to get
just to hit the ground at running as hard as you could to try to get kids to come play for you.
From everybody and poach and just grind, and then all of a sudden you look up and you got a really good class. Well, in the early signing period stuff, you can't do that anymore. You just don't have the time. And now we're in the pandemic signing period, and like, coaches are getting hired and fired 2 days before signing day, and so it's just a very odd year, as you mentioned. Pretty much everyone is in a game week right now, so we're all sort of figuring this out as we go, and it should be an interesting day.
What percentage of recruits do you think are going to sign on Wednesday? Like, so usually I think it had gotten to the point where it was like 75 or 80% of the top players would sign early. Do you still anticipate, or do you think more will hold off? What's the vibe so far as you can tell in terms of who's signing and who's waiting?
Yeah, last three classes it was like 74, 81, 82%, I think was the way it was trending. And I would have expected in a typical year it would have just settled in at around 80, 81, 82% of prospects signed. But I don't know the answer to the question, but I do wonder. I kind of suspect that maybe that number's going to tick down a little bit, back to 65% or something like that. Because think about it. I mean, a bunch of kids are signing with schools they've never visited. Like, a lot of kids are doing that. Never stepped on foot on campus. And you know, likewise, a bunch of coaches are signing kids they've never seen. You know, they don't even, in some cases, have a really firm grasp on just sort of their size and that kind of stuff. And so it just has created a little bit more uncertainty. You know, one anecdote I've been telling, like, I had a group of 5 coach hit me up and was like, you know what, we're not even sure. Like, we know we're going to have X number of players sign, but we got another X number of players that are just waiting to see which of our upperclassmen are going to opt back in for an additional year of COVID eligibility, and how that's going to affect their opportunity for playing time. Yeah. And so there's things like that you wouldn't even really think about that are present in this cycle that could create some more uncertainty and cause some guys to hold off.
There are a lot of people that have asked me this, including my wife, and I haven't looked into the research enough, but the number of scholarships usually for college football is 85. They now are not counting this season for COVID because of eligibility purposes, so you can come back and play again. How are the scholarship numbers going to work going forward? And how do they – and I know, you know, next year, theoretically, the seniors could come back, but it adds up and becomes an issue not just for next year but for the years ahead too. Have you heard officially what they're going to do, what the numbers are going to be? How are they going to even handle scholarship limitations?
It's really interesting. So, next year, 85 is the scholarship number. If you would have exhausted your eligibility this season, you can come back. Really, everyone's getting a free year this year. It doesn't count against their eligibility.
Right.
And so next year, you can be above that 85 limit. But as I understand it, in 2022, you got to be back to 85. And so what that's going to mean is, while seniors this year can come back and to no penalty, and you can be at 96 players or whatever it is, and by the time the juniors are seniors, and by the time the juniors' typical eligibility would have run out, and they have that additional year in 2022, you got to be back down to 85. And so at that point, some colleges are going to be faced with the decision, okay, do we want these upperclassmen back that have run their course from a typical standpoint, but maybe want that additional year of eligibility? Do we say, no, thanks, like you can't come back, you've got your degree, see ya, thanks for your efforts, and give that spot to a freshman? Or do we take a smaller 22 class and say, you know what, we got too many guys coming back on the roster among the upperclassmen? So what I think could actually happen is there could be class of 2022 scholarships that just evaporate, just aren't there because there's not enough scholarship spots available on rosters based on teams letting some players come back for additional years of eligibility. Now, on the flip side, though, I think you're going to see a lot of schools just say, hey, you graduated, you got your 4 years here, we did our job, we got to fulfill your spot with an underclassman, even if you want to take that additional year of eligibility. So to answer your question, though, it's complex, and it's really interesting to see how these personnel folks are going to manage this situation.
Not to mention, then you toss in the new transfer rule, right? So You've got, managing the numbers is going to turn into almost like you need a salary cap guru who's just in charge of the scholarships to try to figure out scholarships, right?
Yeah, well, and think about it too. So all those things I talked about in terms of the uncertainty about this recruiting cycle and why guys might be holding off and might not have as much information. Think about that, and now toss in the free one-time transfer rule that's coming down, and think about all the transfers that are about to start popping up. It's already been a crazy movement in that direction, and now if you add just that other wrinkle of just how many guys are going to be sold a bad bill of goods or vice versa with the colleges, the transfer portal is going to be popping. And so I think it's just it's an interesting situation because right now college personnel departments have to have sort of a college scouting side. You got to mine that transfer portal in the same way you got to recruit your own state, and the teams that do it well are going to be able to kind of really find an angle.
I know this is going to stun you, but I'm looking at the composite rankings. I shouldn't say stun you. It's going to stun my listeners. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU, Clemson are the top five right now. They've been the top five for like a decade. Who is impressing you? Oregon sliding up a decent amount there. Who is impressing you, and is this going to be a day where – I don't even know the answer on this. Are they going to have a lot of announcements like they ordinarily would for signing day, or because of COVID, is that kind of going to disappear? What is the day going to feel like if you are a college football fan?
And by the way, you mentioned I'll answer that question, but you're right. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, LSU, all of the typical usual suspects. That said, Clemson at 5 is higher than they usually are. Last year was Clemson's highest ranked class of all time. This year, potentially even higher. So in that sense, like Clemson is like just now starting to hit its stride from a recruiting standpoint. Like the best is yet to come from Clemson is sort of the point there. So don't expect things to slow down there because they're actually recruiting better than ever. They're typically kind of a 10 to 15 recruiting class, and they just maximize those guys. And now they're actually recruiting 5 stars. And
that new movie, by the way, on ESPN Plus just hooked them up for the next. Have you seen that yet? The safety movie? Like my
I've
10-year-old
seen
was
the
watching.
previews for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I don't, if you watched that yet,
He loved
looks
it.
like there's some
My
questionable looking athletes
10-year-old
in there.
watched it. It's going to be like the Rudy of their generation. So every kid on the planet is going to be like, "Oh, Clemson's the best school ever. I've got to go to Clemson." I mean, it's probably the best, and I'm not even kidding about this. The games themselves are certainly the best recruiting tools, but in terms of a pop culture impact, and if people don't know what I'm talking about, they made a movie about one of Clemson's football players who had to raise, I think it was his little brother, and had him on campus and everything else. And my 10-year-old, it's on Disney Plus. It's only been out a few days. My 10-year-old has already watched it. All of his he had his buddies over the other day after our basketball game. They were playing in the backyard. They were all sitting around talking about it. Like every 10-year-old in America is going to have seen safety by the time, Christmas Day is here, basically.
As if Clemson needed any more help.
Yeah, right. I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's the greatest thing ever for Clemson. So you're saying now they're kind of going to even more of an elite status than they have before. Who else is out there that you think? And I think I asked the question, like, what is it going to look like? Are we going to have a typical, like hat ceremony kind of day, or what do you anticipate?
Yeah, we will. I mean, there's going to be certainly a lot of announcements over the course of the day, and there'll be more Zoom announcements than the typical kind of big press conference signing day ceremonies in a high school gym, I'm sure. But it'll look different. But we'll still have plenty of announcements, and I think that you could see some flips, decommitments, things of that nature. But like there's still, for example, like the All-American Bowl is a game I'm associated with, and I picked the roster for, and so. There is no All-American Bowl this year because of all the COVID issues. And so instead on January 2nd, there's going to be a kind of a commitment show where I think about 12 guys are making their college decisions on that show. So there's some, in addition to that, there is, and that's got some of the best players in the country and some of the five-star types. But on Wednesday, there's going to be, and Thursday and Friday too, honestly, over the course of the week, there'll be several commitments and big commitments at that. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be news, there's going to be stories, there's going to be narrative. But, again, colleges also have to split the day preparing for whatever game they got this weekend. So it's going to be a little less pomp probably from the college programs just because they're busy. But there'll be plenty of action on the recruiting front.
Talking to Bart and Simmons, 247 Sports National Recruiting Analyst. Are there players that you have seen? I know this is a different kind of year. Are there players that you have seen enough of to be like, hey, these guys have the potential to be difference makers next year in college football? In other words, are there guys who are freakish enough talents that they're standing out to you in that respect?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere. I think I would say just off the top of my head, I mean, some of the guys, like our number one player in the country, the number one player in our 247 Sports Composite, a guy named Corey Foreman. He might go to USC, might go to LSU, might go to Clemson, Georgia, Arizona State. He is a lot like Chase Young, big defensive end that is just sort of a freak body type, freak athlete, and so he's going to be a guy that is a major impact player. I think, Ohio State right now is just recruiting wide receivers under Brian Hartline as well as better than anybody in the country. They're getting a kid from Washington named Emeka Buka, who is incredibly polished, incredibly physical, incredibly fast. Miami's got 2 5-stars this year, which is, that's big for them. Leonard Taylor and James Williams, a couple freak defensive players. So these guys are all over the class, and there's definitely the fair share of elite players. And sure, we would have liked to have seen them compete head-to-head at the All-American Bowl and that kind of stuff. But there's still a lot of guys in this cycle that we're very confident are going to be making a splash early.
Any teams in particular that you think, hey, at the end of Wednesday signing day, this is going to be a story?
USC could make a pretty strong close. As far as predicting teams that kind of win the day, USC's got a shot there. And again, Corey Foreman's announced on January 2nd. He's signing tomorrow, but won't announce until January 2nd. And so that's a guy that they could land. LSU, despite the season they're having, they're recruiting at a really high level, and they could make some moves. Georgia has been really under Kirby Smart. They've won a lot of signing days. I mean, when we're talking about winning the cycle and winning the day, Georgia has done a heck of a job winning a lot of those days because they just managed to kind of save enough in the back of the bag there where they can just sort of pull it out and have a couple surprises that no one saw coming. So Georgia certainly is a contender there as well. And Florida, Florida's in the mix for some big names. That's typically kind of where things wind down to on signing day is sort of those SEC programs. They're the ones that are all jostling for the same guys late, and a bunch of those programs have a chance to make some moves on Wednesday.
We're talking to Bart and Simmons, national recruiting analyst, 247 Sports. What happens at a program like Auburn? Like, were you stunned that Auburn fired Gus Malzahn? Not even that they made the decision to do it, but that they fired him right before signing day. And how in the world does that work for a program like Auburn that already has committed recruits, but how does that process play out?
Yeah, I was stunned that they fired. I was surprised that they fired him. The signing day timing, I kind of understand because it almost looks worse if you wait till after all those guys sign and then you fire them. You almost have to make the move before the kids sign. Otherwise, those guys are going to want out of their LOIs. You got to let them out of their LOIs, and it's just sort of a bad look. And so I guess I understand making the move before signing day. And probably, look, you should never, especially, we talked about the transfer portal, especially with the ability to supplement with the transfer portal now. I don't think you can ever make a decision on a coach based on one recruiting class, based on who's in there and guys that got committed. Oh, don't fire them because they'll lose this class, or, we gotta hire this guy before the early signing period so we can get we don't even know which these guys are going to be good. I mean, we think we know, we got an idea, but I think Auburn they just felt like they needed to move on. And hey, maybe Kevin Steele is the guy that they keep, in which case that's a guy that has been an elite recruiter throughout his career and has spent some time at Alabama running that recruiting department. And so I think there's angles that Auburn can take this that can really be a boon for their recruiting even this cycle. Now, granted, they were going to have a pretty good day. They were going to land a few really elite players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that they might not land at this point, or maybe they'll get pushed off until the next signing period. But I think that they, depending on how this plays out and who they get, even if it is a guy like Kevin Steele, they got a chance to have a pretty strong February, I would imagine.
Last question for you. I think you were high school teammates with Clark Lee, who is now the Vanderbilt head football coach. What is Clark Lee like? What does it feel like to now know that you played high school football with a Power 5 head coach?
Clay, I'm telling you, man, he's incredible. I mean, I really mean that. And he is as I've been around a lot of coaches. And I know that there's a bias here with Clark. I know him, and I've had access and insight and been able to watch him maybe in to a level that I haven't had a chance to with some others. But I've never seen a better coach. I've never seen a better teacher. I've never, he is a guy, and that's just not me saying it. I mean, you can talk to anyone that's coached with him or played under him. Get him on the show, get him on the record. I guarantee you that they'll echo that. He's an incredible communicator. He's a great teacher. He understands big picture. He understands how in today's game relationships matter, and building trust and building culture matter more so than the X's and O's. I think he's going to do such a good job at Vanderbilt, and I think that's a dream hire for them. And I think that, and I know that's sort of you just have to trust me on that, because how do you know? But I think a lot of people will kind of see it as soon as his intro press conference takes place. You'll see a lot of those things because he's a super authentic person. He's a super thoughtful and conscientious person, and he's a heck of a football coach.
Did you ever think that he would be a coach when you guys were playing high school? Were you on the same team together playing high school football?
Yeah, no. I'll tell you, to be honest with you, I mean, I wouldn't have picked him out in high school as the guy that would be, but very early. But he played baseball in college, and then he walked on at Vanderbilt. And at some point along that way, he became very focused and driven and goal oriented in terms of being the best coach he could be. And the way he's evolved over the last 15 years, 20 years is unbelievable. I mean, just absolutely made himself into what he is in a very intentional way. And so, no, I would not have picked him out among our team. We had a really good football team. And look, and I played with the head coach at BGA was on our team, Jonas Rodriguez. The head coach of CPA, Ingle Martin, just won a state championship. We had several guys that played Division I football. It was a great group. Clark would have been down the list a little bit in high school, but he has built himself into something that is really, I think, really special, really unique.
So you'll be excited to go watch Vanderbilt play, maybe in a way you weren't before.
There's no doubt. Yeah. And I think a lot of Nashvilleians will feel the same way as they get to know him as well.